Calling this meeting of the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education back to order. Item 4.1, our broadcast statement, which tonight will be read by our student member, Halbo.
This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air Sunday, August 19th at 6 p.m. and Monday, August 20th at noon, and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. We welcome members of the audience to address the board. Please complete a speaker form located in the back of the community room and give them to our communications representative, along with any handouts you may have for the board prior to the conclusion of the item's presentation. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will ask that you please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda. Please also turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate.
Thank you to our new student board member, Halbo. Item 4.2, tonight's Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Daryl Wu, board member Daryl Wu, followed by a song from our Freedom School participants in recognition of their wonderful work.
Thank you, President Ryan. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Board Member Wu. Tonight we have the opportunity to hear from a remarkable group of students that are near and dear to my heart. My own daughter, Brooklyn, and my son, Tristan, have had the opportunity to be Freedom School scholars, my daughter for 2 years, my son for 1. Before we ask you to come up and share something inside so strong, I am going to have the privilege of reading a bit about the work that your exemplary organizations are leading. First, Jackie Rose and the Rose Family Creative Empowerment Center, formerly Focus on Family, have led a successful 30-year program really providing access to high-quality and life-changing services and enrichment opportunities to help build the confidence and capacity of our community to overcome historical predictors of underachievement and gang involvement, including poverty, substance, and physical abuse, food insecurity, and other traumatic experiences. Rose Family Creative Family Empowerment Center currently operates after-school programs at Parkway Elementary, Susan B. Anthony Elementary, John Still K-8, Luther Burbank High School, and Phoenix Park. We're also very proud to say that for the past 4 years, they have operated CDF Freedom Schools, of which my daughter was a participant. This year, they operated Freedom Schools programming at John Still and also operated at Parkway Elementary. Tonight, they will be joined by the Roberts Family Development Center, who also operates Freedom Schools, to lead us in a traditional harambe. But before they do, let me share a bit about our wonderful partners in Freedom Schools at the Roberts Family Resource Center. Rooted in the civil rights movements and youth-led efforts to make a difference, the Children's Defense Fund Freedom Schools model combats summer learning loss through a broad range of integrated activities. The model focuses on the importance of literature, adult involvement, social skills, and service in the overall development of children. The model's award-winning integrated reading curriculum fosters an I can make a difference attitude in both the children served and the young adults facilitating the curriculum. Freedom Schools is a 6-week summer program. The daily schedule includes 30 minutes of harambe, a Swahili word for let's pull together. Swahili word for let's pull together. So tonight we're going to have an opportunity to hear from some of our Freedom School scholars, and I see my daughter's teacher, Mr. Jordan, also in the audience. Shout out to Mr. Jordan. If you can please come up to the dais to lead us in harambe. We can go down. Sure, let's do it. We know the song, Mai. Yeah. We can do the song. Something inside. We got it. know this song. Can we have somebody in the microphone who isn't embarrassed to sing? Oh, sure. I got it. I'm gonna see if I remember this song, right? Think I can do it?
Okay, so we're going to be singing the motivational song portion of Harambe. And this is the song that all the kids love, and it really gets them excited, and it has a lot of positive affirmations. That's why they love it so much. So we're going to be singing that for you guys.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run.
I run like a track star.
You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong.
Let's live. I know that I never make it.
Cause you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone.
Oh no,
Something inside so strong.
oh,
Something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing.
I'll sing.
You hide behind walls of Jericho. Your lies will come tumbling.
Break it down, break it down, break it down.
Deny my place in time. You squander the world, that's fine.
My light will shine so brightly.
Because there's something inside so strong.
So strong, let's live. I know that I
Make it.
make it.
But you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You know that my pride was gone.
Oh no, oh no.
Something inside so strong.
Oh,
Something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters,
you said.
when they insist we're just not good enough.
Oh no, oh no, oh no.
But we know better.
We know better.
Let's look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway. Gonna do it anyway. Something inside so strong. And I know that I can make it. When you're doing me wrong, so wrong. All that my pride was gone. Oh no. Something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong.
Be what I wanna be. If I work hard enough, I'll be what I wanna be. I know I can. Be what I wanna be. If I work hard enough, I'll be what I wanna be.
Brothers and
Sisters, you said.
When they insist we're just not good enough.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
Well, we know better.
We know better.
Let's look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway.
Say what?
Gonna do it anyway.
Say what?
Gonna do
I am pretty certain that's going to be the best part of my week. Thank you so much. It's hard not to cry. Your infectious enthusiasm and your beautiful faces are just incredible. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. If we can call Jackie Rose and Daryl Roberts up to the podium, they're going to say a few words. Good evening, Miss Rose.
Good evening. Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent, and board members. It's just such a pleasure to be here tonight. As you can see, that song just really motivates you as it motivated me and those kids that are here tonight. Imagine waking up for 6 weeks every morning to that. That made my day for 6 weeks because the kids were there. Program started at 7:30. At 8 o'clock, they were there at 7:30, sometimes 7 and 7:30, waiting for the beginning of Harambe. And as Jesse just said in the opening remarks, we served 200 kids, 100 at John Steele, 100 at Parkway. And our focus was to improve the love of reading for our scholars and to bring those culturally relevant books and put them in their hands that they got to go home with every week. It was just a pleasure to watch those kids do that. And then to see them in those fun-loving environments that they don't always get to be in the regular school week. Kids that we knew during our after-school program didn't do well during the school year did absolutely fantastic in this program, simply because of the structure of this program. It was relatable. We had college students who were basically there that were greeting them, loving, caring adults that were caring for them every day, and our kids did wonderful in these kinds of environments. And then the other thing, and some of our parents were here tonight as well, the other piece of this is the piece where once a week parents had to get involved. Our parents were really engaged in this program. And as you know, it's really hard to get parents engaged, but they were engaged in this program. We did innovative outside of the box. They went on every field trip we went to. We went to San Francisco. We went to Sac State. Some of the parents had never been to those environments before. So to expose them to those types of things is a wonderful thing for us to continue during the school year. So we're excited about that foundation we've laid with Freedom School. And so the other thing that we actually did, our schools are in South Sacramento, and our schools have gone through a great deal of trauma and a great deal of situations where our kids are dealing with loss, dealing with generational poverty and generational trauma in our communities. So this program is a way for them to actually engage. Our staff went through trauma-informed training, and some of the things that we did were around those books where we actually could get some books that actually talked about those kinds of things. Our kids were able to talk about it and to go through the healing process as well as our parents. And so we did Zumba, we did Paint Like a Butterfly, we did all kind of things with our parents, and our parents were really engaged. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that program. And one of the other things that we did, and our superintendent came out, is that we did the National Day of Social Action, where this year it's a voting year. So we had voter registration. Our goal was the National Day of Social Action was all around voting. So we had the voter registration people come up and set the booths up, and the kids got to vote in a regular booth. The parents got to vote. Some of our parents had said they had never voted before. So this was really an educational process, and the superintendent actually came out and witnessed some of that stuff at our site, and it was a beautiful thing to do. So again, Freedom School is near and dear to my heart. This is a wonderful program, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rose, for your leadership.
There's not much more I can add to Freedom School because Ms. Rose has done an excellent job of explaining to you the various components, the commitment, the diversity within Freedom School, that social action component, which truly is an important part of what our kids are learning. But I'll tell you, one of the things that you can't help but miss are the words to the song that the kids thing, something inside so strong. It is the determination that comes with having to fight through a daily struggle of challenges in the communities where they live. Whether we talk about the trauma of recent killings in our community, whether we talk about racial injustice that occur far too often, Freedom School has given our kids the ability to be able to talk about those things, our parents to be able to address those things, but more importantly, giving our community an understanding that they must be unafraid to come to board meetings, to come to the school, and to hold folks accountable. And quite frankly, I'm hoping that Freedom School gives us the ability to start saying to you, look, you are training our future. You are funding the training of our future. We appreciate that, but also hear the voices and understand what the challenges are. Tonight, you'll be talking about some issues that we really don't want to talk about. We talked about this 6 months ago at the very same high school, some of the racial challenges. Well, quite honestly, we shouldn't have to continue to talk about that. What Freedom School talks about is diversity, talks about putting in front of our kids people who look like our kids, who understand the plight of our kids, who understand the situations our kids come from. I encourage you to continue to be bold enough to address those issues, to no longer allow those things to happen, which have happened recently on McClatchy High's campus, and to say enough's enough, we're tired of it, we're going to change things. It does take something inside so strong for us to do things differently. I challenge you as a board, as a superintendent, as a member of this community, and as kids in our Freedom School and parents in our Freedom School program, to not just come be here tonight to sing something inside, but be prepared to work with you and also challenge you and assist you as change is occurring in our district. We appreciate your support for Freedom School. It has not only become infectious in Sac City, but in 4 other school districts, where more than 700 other kids participate in Freedom School as well. So totally, almost 1,000 plus children participate in Freedom School in the region. Sac City is the first Freedom School site. Ms. Allen, thank you very much for that early support. But with that early support came an understanding of others that this was important. So we look forward to continuing that work, but we also look forward to hearing how you're going to make some changes happen this year, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Item 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session.
I have none, Madam President, but the superintendent does.
I'm pleased to announce that the board, by unanimous vote of 5-0 with board members Hanson and Pritchett absent, approved this evening the appointment of Mr. John Quinto as Chief Business Officer.
At this time, I understand that Mr. Quinto has driven quite a long distance to be with us this evening. If you can approach the dais to please say a few words.
Well, good evening, Board President Ryan, fellow board members, Superintendent Aguilar, and cabinet members. It is indeed an honor to serve Superintendent Aguilar, the board, the community, most importantly, the public school needs of our students. We did travel a little bit, so I'd be remiss not to introduce my bride of 35 years, Terry, and we thank you for this great opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Quinto. Thank you, Terry. We are thrilled to have you join the district in this important role. Item 6.0, agenda adoption. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Item 7.0, public comment.
Yes, we have 9 members in the public with public comment. If you could come up when you hear your name called. Marion Bryson, Peter Clark, followed by Judy Moneymaker, Jackie Rose, Laureen Pryor, Daryl Roberts, James Halderman, Allegra Taylor, Pastor Chris Logan, and Kenya Martinez.
Good evening.
Good evening. This is my first time, so you guys be gentle with me. Hello, my name is Marion Bryson, and first of all, I want to say good evening to President Jesse Ryan and the Superintendent and the Board. The reason why I'm here today is to share some information on the event that we're planning with the Black Parallel School Board. I'm the new parent organizer with the school board, and my job is to engage parents and get parents more involved. What we're doing for the first day of school is we're having a National Million Father March. And what that entails is that the Black Star Project out of Chicago started this program. It's national-wide. And the reason that we're doing this is that we're trying to get more fathers involved, more men involved, and be committed into the education of our children. At this time, the community feel that we're in emergency crises, and we're here to try to help. So by having the fathers escort the kids to school on the first day, it gives the kids more advantages in the rest of their school year and more encouragement to work a little harder. We're calling that all men on this day show up, get involved, participate, and be active in the educational system of their kids. And what study shows is that most times when fathers are involved with anything active at the school district or the school board or anything with the schools, the kids are learning more and the kids perform better. And that's our recommendation to do with Black Million Father March Day. Also, it includes the moms too, because moms are involved. And what the point about this thing, we don't want it to be a big day. You don't have to do anything special, just show up, encourage your kids on the first day, help be a part of what we're trying to do to reduce the suspension rate that we're working on now, and we're working on the attendance to increase the attendance, and also we want to increase the overall outcome of the achievement of our students. So I'm here today to ask the board if you guys could please help us by sharing this information, and also if you could maybe do a robocall to the schools that are involving with us. Right now I have about 50 to 100 fathers that's already signed up.
Thank you very much. You did an excellent job for your first board meeting.
Thank you.
We have one question from Board Member Michael Minnick. If you could just stay for one moment.
Sorry,
please.
before you take off, do you have electronic information, flyers or something that
Yes.
we could then
Yes.
distribute through our own networks? 'Cause
Yes, what I
this
do
is
have,
important stuff.
well, we're just requiring of the dads just to give us a call, to give us their information, their name, and what school their kids are attending, and maybe if they have time to go in and get a little bit more about the school, a little feel of the school. So we have a flyer, and also we have a sign-in sheet, where if there's anybody that wants to do a group of dads, you can take the sheet and get the signatures and fax it to us or email it to us.
Do you have that flyer electronically that you could send to us?
Yes.
Can I'll give you this, and then I can make sure that the rest of us all get it. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, please. And I didn't state before we began, each of you have 2 minutes for your public comment.
Good evening. A couple of Thursdays ago, I addressed the board with the abuse of my son at Southern Middle School by teacher Jane Valdez. It was not just Jane Valdez, it was teachers in the school that conspired, and there's a cover-up. Principal Kristen Tahara Martin, Olga Sims, Nathaniel Browning. I assert they're all complicit in suppressing the abuse of my son. Big kid susceptible to bullying, instead of protecting him, you harmed him. If he had done something wrong back, if he had shouted back at that teacher while she basically took him through torture, he would have been locked up. I don't think the school has reported the harm done to him. I don't think they've done anything at all. And now I understand that Mr. Brown is conducting an investigation. I highly recommend maybe you all assign this to an outside investigator. I don't think you're all capable of handling it. That's my position. I think that things that should be done probably include a grand jury referral, and that's probably a place to start. We hear with a Catholic Church, we say, oh, doggone, that priest, that cardinal didn't do so. Well, we probably got some cardinals and priests around here abusing kids and covering it up for each other. But again, also I heard of someone who was abused by that very same teacher 10 years ago when I was here, someone advocating for me here this evening by Jane Valdez. So bottom line is a teacher couldn't get away with nonsense for that long without people up here covering up for them. Again, I highly recommend that an outside investigator handle my matter. I probably handle a lot of matters pertaining to this school. I've notified the board that my son was abused. I've notified the board that Olga Sims, Nathaniel Browning, Kristen Tahara Martin, principal, participated in suppressing the abuse of my son to cover up for a teacher, very likely because she probably got a lot of dirt in them. She's been doing a lot of nonsense for a long time. The bottom line is I'm notifying the board what has happened. I understand you have assigned Mr. Brown to me. Whether Mr. Brown has the tools to go far enough because he's working within his own complex, it may be a bit difficult for him. You all probably need an outside investigator to handle this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Judy Moneymaker, and I'm letting you know that Eastland School intends to submit a charter school application for the 2019-2020 school year.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Kenya Martinez from the Coalition for Students with Disabilities. I'm coming here today because I am asking once again on behalf of the coalition about the Great Schools audit and whether or not Sacramento City Unified School District is going to do their part and make sure that they honor the recommendations that were made on that audit. We still have parents, students who are in peril because they are not getting the services that they so richly need and deserve throughout our school district. So I encourage the board to continue to push forward and follow through with the recommendations that were made in the audit. Thank you.
Thank you for your continued advocacy.
Good evening. So here we are again talking about C.K. McClatchy and the issues that they're having over there on that campus. Our kids have to fight the system, both the educational system and the criminal justice system. They have to fight these teachers who don't want them in their classrooms. And now you're saying to them that you have to fight your peers on your campuses. This is absolutely ridiculous. Who's protecting black students in Sac City Unified School District? The same energy I see you guys devote to things like the LGBTQ youth and the sanctuary city or sanctuary, whatever you put in your policies the other day, that same energy needs to go towards dealing with black kids and the issues that they're facing because nobody's protecting them. And every time we come here, we hear something about, well, we can't do whatever we can't do because we don't have the backing of the teachers union. Well, consider us the kids union. We need you guys to start acting. We want zero tolerance for racism on your campuses. Our kids should not have to start school in fear of their peers, knowing that y'all aren't doing anything, and in fear of the police that you put on the campuses. This is absolutely ridiculous, and we want some changes now. We expect that from you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Well, just to pick up where she left off at. So, when a black child is being harassed, bullied, racially profiled, just blatant, cruel hatred acts against them, you all expect them to come to school and be functionable. Do you not think that our children have feelings? Do you think that because black people have a resilience, that our children are just going to normalize the constant abuse that they're experiencing in your school district? No, they're not. And they shouldn't have to. The same way you quickly penalize, suspend, expel black children is the same way we want to see you quickly deal with these two children of privilege who felt that they had a right to do what they did. It was cruel, it was hatred, It was racist, and we want you to do something about it. If you continue to allow white children of privilege to do the things that they've been allowed to do in your district, what are you going to do when the black children get sick and tired of being sick and tired and start reacting to some of that hatred that they're experiencing? Huh? You'll be quick to expel and suspend our kids. We know how that works. We've seen you do it. Start doing that with some of these privileged kids. I don't care if their parents are doctors, lawyers, or 45. I don't care. It is time for you to protect our children. And if you do not protect our children, we are going to go completely citywide and start petitioning black parents to pull their kids out of your school. So if we got to get some days where we're just not going to show up to school, you know, do the math. That's the next steps that we prepare to take. We're expecting you to do something about the children that felt they had the right to do what they did.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
The anger from the two women speakers before me, to me, represents what you should be angry about. What occurred at McClatchy High is part of a symptom that has occurred far too often. And we've talked about it, but I don't know what we've done about it. We've talked. We've had town houses or town meetings, or, you know, the superintendents had meetings, and we've had groups that met and talked about it. But I'm not sure we really addressed the people who are really making this happen. I keep hearing a couple teachers who support this type of effort. I don't know who they are. I wish I knew them by name, or I would call them out by name. But those two children you know by name, and unfortunately, they have to be, in this case, told unacceptable. If they were fighting on a school campus, zero tolerance would mean they would be expelled. If they created or brought the hurt to another child, to bully a child on campus, zero tolerance would say they'd be dismissed. I'm not sure what the investigation is about. I'm not sure what the investigation will bring about, but unless it says there's zero tolerance for this in the future, it really makes no sense. I don't want to come to Sac City again for this purpose. I really wish I was at Martin Luther King Junior High School at the parent orientation, on the Thomas Park Elementary School where we serve for the parent orientation. But I had to come to Sac City School District where we serve to say, it's unacceptable. Superintendent, you promised that things would be different with you being here. I'm expecting you to hold up your promise. Members of the board who I know personally, as you know, I'm going to continue to call you, continue to text you, continue to Facebook you, and let you know this is unacceptable. And until you say it's unacceptable, things will remain the same.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. Grace and peace, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. My name is Pastor Chris Logan, and I am the pastor of the Movement United Methodist Church, where our vision is to upend oppressive systems through faith in Jesus. I want to pick up where they left off. They focused on how we should handle the students who dealt with the racism or who were doing the racist activity. I want to talk about the treatment of our black students in our schools. As a black man, I'm increasingly aware of the fact that because of my skin color and because of my size, I am perceived as a threat just for being who I am. But how low have we sunken when our schools are a place where kids don't feel safe, where black students are being targeted by SROs, where a student can develop a criminal history just for being a student? We talk a good game about the school-to-prison pipeline, but this is ground zero. Our schools are ground zero. We cannot suspend a student for 3 days for willful defiance and expect them to come back a different person. Most of the misbehavior that occurs in our classroom is because students do not know how to voice what they need. They don't have the self-regulating skills to deal what's happening in emotional moments. And besides suspending kids for misbehavior, what tools are we giving students to process what happened in the classroom so that they can come back a better student? What processes do we have in place to restore relationships between students and staff? We have an opportunity to restore our students. I mentioned that I stand as a black man who has experienced racism, but I stand as a pastor because we have a moral responsibility to care for our youth. Our schools are not prisons. We should not be prepping them for prison by having officers antagonize them in our school spaces. We're asking that you develop policies and procedures to care for the whole child. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir.
Good evening. My name is Charles Taylor, and I'm here to talk about the McClatchy situation. It was to my attention that people involved in this last incident were also participants in the cheerleading scandal at McClatchy over the last school year. And this seems to be an ongoing problem at this school. And until you guys decide to do something that's going to be having an effect that they know that this cannot continue, it has to stop. And until something is done, we'll continue to be here and supporting our black students. It's time for them to be recognized just like any other student, have the same privileges and be protected in the same manner, and not have to be afraid to go to school. Or if they do go to school and get into an altercation, they know they will be sent home and suspended. So we want you to give them the same consideration that all the other kids are getting. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Good evening, board members, superintendent, supporting staff, community members. I approach you tonight and I appreciate the opportunity to just take a few minutes of your mental capacity to focus on tomorrow, the future, and how it gets there. And that is in the area we hear a lot about. Some people say STEM, some people add the arts and call it STEAM. And then there's beyond that, the thinking there, because at the elementary school, how does a student get introduced to that? If it's not at home, how do they get it? Well, I encourage the schools to establish at every school at least some form of a 3D printer, because that's the early stage of the effort. People say, well, a 3D printer is kind of a technical thing, but there's a lot of thinking that goes into it, and it creates involvement. And when a student gets involved, guess what? The school becomes theirs, and they make it theirs, and they make their friends theirs, and you have a lot less problems. And they all become a team because they have to work together to make it happen. So I encourage you to, at this stage, as you visit each school, ask the principal, what are they doing in this area to move the students well along in their future? You know, in order to run a computer, you have to be able to read. Guess what? They now have motivation to read. You start doing a design to 3D print, guess what? There's some artwork there, isn't there? And there's thinking and capacity and range. All these things come into play. So now we have the student engaged and involved instead of taking each component as a separate item by itself. So I really encourage you to step into that thinking, because the future's here, 3D printing's here, and beyond that, just think. UC Davis, they're already printing some of your body parts for you. So when you get to my age, you can look forward to having some replacements right away, or when you get a little older, or you might need them now. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you letting me occupy your minds, and I encourage you to move in that direction.
Thank you very much, sir.
You know I owe you one.
At this time, we're going to take board member comments and reactions to public comment. Before we start hearing from board members, and those of you who have prepared a statement or want to speak tonight on the racist social media post, please indicate so. I know that Vice President Wu will be reading a statement on behalf of a board member who isn't here tonight. I just want to begin by saying that what you saw tonight was really two opposite ends of the emotional spectrum. Us celebrating the beauty of Black pride represented in freedom schools, in which children like my daughter leave feeling confident, feeling valued, feeling like they're connected to their history and their heritage, and can, in fact, achieve. And then you heard the results of a racist incident that occurred over the summer from individuals who felt empowered to speak hate. And the results of that, as we know, are children, like my own two children, feeling that their sense of self-worth, belonging, purpose, connectedness to their school is in question. I had a conversation last night that a parent never wants to have with a child. My daughter walked in on me looking really distraught, and I had been on the phone all night talking about this issue. And she asked me, "Mom, what is wrong? Why are you so upset?" And I told her that I was upset because some students had said a terribly ugly, hateful thing about Black people. And my daughter, being a very smart, inquisitive 8-year-old girl, pressed me. She wanted to know more. What did they say? And I said, they said something so awful I can't repeat the word. And she didn't understand. Why can't you tell me? I want to know. Why would somebody say that? Why would somebody say that about me, Mommy? Now, no one should have to tell their 8-year-old that based on their skin color, there is hate, there is a belief that they don't have the potential to reach against great odds. And that was a conversation I did not want to be having with my daughter. And yet it's a conversation that I've had far too many times as a result of the rhetoric that we're hearing at a national level and communities that are feeling empowered to continue to spew that hate speech. I'm going to share some of the work that we're doing at the district to try and address that. There is an urgency of now, and in my belief, we cannot act expeditiously enough because children are hurting and there is a community that is being ripped apart. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to board members, including Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Ryan. And I volunteered to speak or read the statement of Member Hansen, who is unable to come to the meeting this evening. This is his statement. I share the disappointment and outrage of my fellow board members in yet another racist incident roiling our district and the involvement of McClatchy students. While the incident most likely happened off campus and during the summer recess, we recognize that our schools can and should play a constructive role in educating our students about racial equality and acceptable social behavior. Every one of our 2,500 students at McClatchy deserves a safe and supportive learning environment dedicated to their success. We have to do it at CK McClatchy. The incidents of racial discourse last year were a wake-up call for greater board and district oversight. We have responded with significantly increased training and support for staff and students, and I am committed to ensuring we stay focused on further efforts. We need our SCTA leadership to also be part of the solution and not part of the problem. I call on them to support our restorative justice practices and to help educate their members to break the silos of privilege that exist at McClatchy. Our strong and effective African-American principal, Peter Lambert, needs their help to be effective. And sadly, the teacher leadership here has been more resistant than supportive. We all need to pull together to change the environment and culture at CKM. And we can't ignore the zeitgeist of the times with the bold racism emanating from our national capital. This seems to have empowered closet racists to come out of the closet and bigots to proudly stand for white racial superiority. These clearly are not the values of Sacramento Unified and of myself and our board. Parents must also take responsibility in educating their children. Our schools can promote positive learning during the day, and we need to have our partners in the home to continue that positive learning during the evening. Please accept my regrets for not attending tonight's meeting in person, and know that I will continue to fight injustice and bigotry in any and all of its forms. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Wu. Do we have other comments or statements from board members at this time? Board Member Vang?
Thank you. Thank you, President Ryan. I just have some thoughts. I just want to share with the community that I'm extremely angry and terribly disappointed in the actions of the two students at McClatchy. As a school board member alone, I want to say, I can't solve the problems of racism in our district, but I do believe that as a collective, and I do believe that our neighborhood schools can really play an important role in helping our students and families make sense of what is happening and create spaces for collective healing. I will not, and this board will not tolerate any racism and anti-Blackness in our schools, especially in a district that we call safe haven. And when we say safe haven, we mean every student. We mean our Black and brown students. Growing up in South Sacramento and being home, I witnessed the negative effects of poverty and institutionalized racism on Black, Latino, and Southeast Asian students. But I also want to take this moment to also say that to be clear, for folks to know that anti-Blackness and hate is not just exclusive to white students as well. And it's important, even me as a school board member and as an Asian American, to also say that it's important for Asian American students because this incident did not happen in silo. When we talk about McClatchy, an early incident regarding the science project also happened as well. And I think it's important for us to be intentional and have those conversations. As an Asian American myself, I think it's important that we need to remember that we benefited from movements led by Black leaders who put their bodies on the line to ensure civil rights and equal opportunities for all communities. I think oftentimes even within our own families, within our own communities, and within our own schools, we're taught to always just teach students to learn, but we never really challenge our students to unlearn and relearn and challenge what's happening around them. We know that white supremacy does not exist in a vacuum. It's structured, that allows institutionalized oppression, systematic racism, and really gives special privileges to dominant groups. What I want to say is that I think it really begins with us starting at home, our parents, our families, having those difficult conversations with our family and our close friends, right? It involves really listening to the experiences and challenges faced by the Black community. And it's really about working alongside activists, community leaders, our parents, and folks in the audience together to change policy and reform the system that negatively impacts our Black and brown students. I do want to thank superintendent and staff for redirecting a lot of their energy this week to open an investigation on the two students. And I trust that we're going to move swiftly and also hold these students accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Vang. Board Member Cochran.
Thank you, President Ryan. So the board members up here and all board members, we are responsible to you. And I was having lunch the other day with a friend of mine, and she reminded me of Lyndon Johnson in 1964 when he was pushing the Civil Rights Act. He had a difficult time. The Southern Democrats were in his way. And as a man from the South, he knew exactly what he was up against. At one point, he had a discussion with Black leaders, and he said, "Make me do this so I can stand up to them. Make me do this." And by the comments tonight that I've heard from the people who've come here, you're making us do this. This is the power that you have, and we have the responsibility of sitting on this board. Making us do it's not going to be easy, but the pressure has to be kept up, and the help has to be kept up. We have to work together to do this. I'm very, very proud of the student presenters tonight, and all of us on the board are listening to the community. But it's more than just listening. We have to do this. We have to be responsive. But I do ask that as you pressure us, that you work with us, and we work together to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cochran. At this time, we're going to hear from our student board member as well.
The destruction of a child or teen psyche that comes from the use of racial slurs and racist rhetoric has been empirically proven. What the students at McClatchy did is not okay. It is not what I wish to see in my district. It is not what I want to see from my peers. As a student of this district and the representative for all the students in this district, seeing those statements made within our district is saddening. We as students, parents, teachers, and community members can and will make a change. Put pressure on the students. We can and should be part of the change.
Thank you very much. I am going to read a statement because I fear that if I just speak, I will become too emotional right now. I do want to say in prefacing the statement, I look into the faces of these beautiful young people from Freedom Schools and think that we cannot fail these students as we are failing far too many students every day. That should be our clarion call tonight as we work forward to address these issues. The latest news of district students recording themselves in blackface is appalling, but unfortunately it's not an isolated incident. We have seen an uptick in these racist incidents across the country as a result of tolerated rhetoric at the national level. I am sickened to continually hear of the toxicity that our Black children must face when walking into our schools and entering our communities. The social toxicity of subtle and overt racist acts must be addressed head-on. That's why I'm personally requesting that appropriate disciplinary action be taken against those students that posted the racist video. I have seen Black and brown students disciplined for far less. Additionally, we as a district and a board must not allow for the minimization of the struggle facing our Black children. We must courageously address their needs. The struggles put upon our Black students are not the same as those faced by other marginalized groups. We cannot run the risk of simply piling them into a list, and we cannot fall into the trap of believing we're serving them because we're serving students who are also struggling. We must disrupt the inequities that are inequitable policies that have often been perpetuated by a system that is inequitable as design. But as the superintendent often says, we have to ensure that we're tackling head-on policies that have perpetuated that inequity. That is why Member Vang and the Policy Committee recently reviewed our student harassment policies, and that's why the committee is working to develop a community effort around the revision of key policies surrounding discipline and police interaction with students. I'm dedicated to revising the current discipline policy and to ensure that we no longer allow disciplinary actions for willful defiance. We can no longer allow the subjectivity of suspending students, and we cannot afford to wait for state law to catch up with us. While discipline policies and procedures only get at part of the issue, I request that staff look into and develop a plan that builds a strong sense of hope, peace, and healing among our underserved Black student community. We need desperately to develop a presence of hope among our students in order to stand in solidarity with them at a time when they are feeling marginalized, disenfranchised, to say the least. I know staff are looking at opportunities to develop and expand efforts around trauma-informed practices, multi-tiered systems of support, and implicit bias trainings. We do not have the luxury of time. I want to stress the urgency for which we begin to outline and attract outside funding for these efforts. We must move forward, as I said, with an urgency of now and take bold action and appropriate steps if we're going to actualize the principles of equity, access, and social justice for our Black students that we have been extolling. Lastly, as part of our Safe Haven School District effort, as Member Vang said, we were proud to be a leader in the state. But being a safe haven school district does not mean being a safe haven school district for the lucky few. Being a safe haven school district means being a safe, welcoming space for all students, Black, brown, immigrant, and other. We cannot allow microaggressions and racism, both subtle and overt, to make our students choose not to come to school. We cannot continue to promote standalone committees without addressing the culture that is so pervasively undermining our Black students' success. And we cannot continue to idly stand by in an environment of hate and toxicity as students like the students that we have at Freedom Schools come to us imploring us to work with our community and demanding that we take action because students who we are serving today do not have the luxury of allowing us to find time to commit to ensuring their success. And with that, this closes public comment. Moving on to item 8.1, Expanded Learning Summer Program Update.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, and members of the board. My name is Iris Taylor, and I am the Chief Academic Officer. And tonight joining me are a team of folks from who participated or were involved in the creation and implementation of our Expanded Learning Summer Program. So we have Vincent Harris, our Chief Improvement and Accountability Officer, Kelly Odipo, our Coordinator of State and Federal Programs, Matt Turkey, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, Liz Vigil, Principal of Rosemont High School, and Mary Harden Young, our Instructional Assistant Superintendent. So as you heard tonight already from Ms. Rose and Mr. Roberts, Sac City was able to offer an array of really rich summer programming for our students, summer learning opportunities. And so tonight we're here to share with you some of the outcomes from this first year of implementation of Sac City's Expanded Learning Summer Program, as you'll hear it referred to tonight as ELSP, because we just love a good acronym. So if you recall the genesis of this summer learning program, it was really born out of a desire to address some of the results of the inequities within the system. And these inequities resulting from disproportionate outcomes for our students. This was an opportunity to redesign the system and reimagine what summer learning could be to address these inequities so that more students' experiences are reflected in our guiding principle, where they're given an equal opportunity to graduate with the greatest number of post-secondary choices from the widest array of options. ELSP, like other district initiatives, was developed and implemented through a lens of equity, access, and social justice. And what this means in Sac City is that first, it was born out of displaying data and seeing the huge disparities in student outcomes, which when presented and analyzed, provoked a moral call to action. We also wanted to build a program that will allow students to participate to the greatest extent possible without having to depend on parent advocacy and ability to navigate the system. So we developed an opt-out program as opposed to an opt-in program. And although the definition of equity, access, and social justice speaks of attending to downdrafting practices, we wanted to design ELSP as an updrafting practice, one that would allow students to come, learn, be engaged, and see themselves as capable learners and to build a growth mindset. And finally, you'll see in tonight's presentation, as in others, we're insistent that we respect the value of data and establish a continuous improvement and accountability mindset. We will once again share examples of where we look at students by name, by need, by inequity, and injustice. The Expanded Learning Summer Program was the first initiative under Superintendent Aguilar's leadership where we tried to bring the theory of change that you see depicted here to life. By this I mean that we designed it with a clearly established articulated measures of success or indicators, some of which you will hear about tonight. Such as improving in reading and in math and graduation in A through G. We conducted it within a very specific window for targeted interventions, 6 weeks, and we sought to have maximum impact despite the power of external forces that our students face in simply getting to school during the summer each day. This is the first initiative where the 4 tenets you see on the right come together, where departments overseeing supervision and evaluation, curriculum and instruction, professional learning, and logistics and operations came together in a concerted effort to improve student learning.
Good evening, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the board. So to get all of those four tenets working together, as Dr. Taylor just mentioned, needed that we have representation from each of our departments on a steering committee. And this steering committee met about every 2 weeks in the run-up to ELSP to plan the program, and then multiple times a week during ELSP to ensure the smooth running of the program. There were 6 distinct different programs in ELSP, each with their own curriculum. So first of all, we have our incoming first grade, who were focused on reading intervention. Incoming third grade, who were focused on reading intervention and math intervention. Incoming seventh grade, focused on ELA and math intervention. We also had our incoming middle school students, so our incoming 7th and incoming 8th grade students focused on practice of SAT and argumentative writing so that we could maintain the eligibility pool for our criterion-based specialty programs and hopefully expand the eligibility pool for those programs. Within our high school programs, there were 2 different things going on. So there was credit recovery for intervention purposes for those students who had failed classes, and also original credit enrichment. So I'm talking about a few bright spots of our ELSP program. So we served over 4,000 students in the program, about 1,800 in elementary and middle school, and 2,178 in high school. For our elementary and middle school students, there were 61% of students who demonstrate an improvement between their ELA pre-assessment and their ELA post-assessment. Within math, 64% of students demonstrate an improvement between their pre-math assessment and their post-math assessment. 326 of our high school students improved their graduation progress status. We had 15 seniors attend ELSP who had not graduated at the end of the school year. Out of these 15 seniors, 10 managed to earn between the 5 and 10 credits they needed so that they could graduate. It's also worth noting that we actually had 2 seniors who needed more than 10 credits to graduate and managed to get more than 10 credits over the 5-week program and have now graduated. So we had a total of 1,197 high school students earning a total of more than 10,000 credits. So that adds up to about 8.5 credits on average for those 1,197 students, which is it's pretty good. 472 high school students earned 866 A through G units. That's about the same rate. So it's about kind of 9 units per student there. 297 of the high school students improved their A through G progress status, and 156 high school students who were previously off track for A through G are now on track for A through G. Another advantage of the summer school program as well was that, as you know, we've adopted a new ELA curriculum for both the elementary, middle, and high school, and teachers were able to implement that, and they were able to try that out prior to the start of the school year. So going on with the bright spots, and I need to refer to this. Oh, no, I can see it pretty well. So a few of our students, some case studies to illustrate some of these bright spots. So a student here who ended 2nd grade and scored 33% on a math pre-assessment, went to ELSP, and then at the end scored 94% on a post-math assessment, which is an increase of 61% there. Another 2nd grade student finished 2nd grade with about 27% on a math assessment, on the pre-assessment there at the end of the year, and then finished ELSP at around 38%, so an increase of 11% for that student. This student finished 6th grade with, and I'm struggling to see that, so I'll have to look at my notes. Okay, so this student, during the ELSP, we have these checkpoints within mathematics, and in the first checkpoint, towards the start of the program, scored 11%, and on the second checkpoint towards the end of the program scored 80%, certainly preparing this student better for middle school. So this student here did not graduate in June, a 12th grade student, because she was missing she had an F in one of her English language arts classes. She did take this English language arts class over the summer, passed the English language arts class, and now this student is going to graduate. This student was ended 11th grade. This student ended 11th grade, subject borderline for A through G, because of an English language arts class. Took the English language arts class over the summer, gained a credit for a C or above, and is now starting her 12th grade year on track for A through G. Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Aguilar and board members. At Rosemont, we had what I consider to be just a thrilling experience. We started the first day of summer school with about approximately half of the number of students who we had signed up showed. And so we had a counselor who, at the end of the first day, called students, recovered a lot of the students who had not been there, we had 2 in-person English 9 courses, but everything else was online credit recovery. So at the end of that first day, we met with our teachers and encouraged them to call every single day for any students who were not there, encourage students while they were in the classes to make adequate progress. We agreed on what we expected students to accomplish in their courses every day, and they were absolutely fabulous, encouraging kids, making sure that they were staying on track. We had kind of a nerve center with, I was in there, the counselor was in there, and one of our teachers, and as students finished a course, they had to bring a completion form to us. We encouraged them, we had conversations with kids, created those connections, congratulated them, told them they could do this, and by the end of the summer program, the students who were no longer in attendance were not there because they had completed made up all of their credits, and they had made up all of their Ds. So we required all of our students to earn Cs or better in all of the courses. So at the end of the session, we had 550 courses completed for about 2,750 credits. So we're very, very excited that it was very, very successful. We're going to track those students over the course of the year and say if this also impacted their attitude about school, and perhaps, see how they're doing in the following year to see if this had kind of a permanent impact on them. But it was a real group effort from the teachers, the support staff, and we're just really grateful that we had this opportunity to help our students achieve grade level readiness.
Thank you, Ms. Veal. Good evening. You've heard our theory of change addressed already tonight, and you know about the 4 tenets. I wanted to share something that was put in place this summer to ensure that those 4 tenets within our theory of change are always working together and invading the space. This summer, a new support structure was created to support our sites. The system of support, the structure included an instructional assistant superintendent. It included 2 content training specialists, one in ELA and one in math, that worked together to support the principal and guide the principal in providing professional learning through daily collaborative time that happened at the end of each day, where teachers would work together, guided by the principal, the training specialist, and the IAS, in helping students achieve grade level readiness. This was a very deliberate plan, and this plan is moving forward within our new IAS structure going forward in the 2018-19 school year as well. Ms. Harden.
Good evening, Superintendent Aguilar, Board President Ryan, and Board. My name is Kelly Odipo, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the challenges of ELSP. So there were a high number of no-shows and passive opt-outs in our program. Also, there was variation in our attendance due to the tension between our adherence to the ELSP attendance policies and also wanting to provide access to all students who really needed to engage in intervention over the summertime. Assessment participation varied across the ELSP program due to monitoring gaps and also access to technology and our web-based platforms. There was also at the high school level a delay in the assessment grading so we ended up receiving some of those grades late. And also, as you know, we had some difficulties with hiring staff as well. So there were 23 schools that hosted ELSP intervention programs, and they are listed here. And there are 11 schools that hosted ELSP enrichment programs, and they are also listed here. Thank you.
Good evening, Board President, Board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. Over the next few slides, we'll talk a bit about some of the data you've already seen, but disaggregated. What I'd like to do, though, is make an overarching point about the data. While there's lots to celebrate and we saw growth across student groups, we definitely did see differences in that growth rate. And so that's the data that we're studying together. Also, it's important to note that as we've talked about the challenges, there's more data we want to just better understand. And so I'll end this portion of the data conversation talking about some of the future work we're going to be doing over the fall to make sure that we really unpack the value of the ELSP investment, but also speak to what it means for our students in terms of their fall performance as well and their ongoing academic success. Particularly for the enrichment program, that was directly created as an opportunity to build the pipeline of students for our specialty criteria-based programs. And so we're very excited to have this data set and to be able to look at the students kind of on a more longitudinal basis. And so you'll hear me wrap up speaking to some of the longitudinal work we'll be doing. But for now, you can see here a breakout in terms of students who were in the intervention portion of the program versus enrichment. And what we'll do with all of these slides, because obviously as a board and as our superintendent has spoken to the importance of making students visible, you'll see the disaggregation of our students by student group, by a target subgroup disaggregation of our Asian student group, and then also our program disaggregation as well. And again, the theme on these slides is while there's lots to be encouraged by in terms of growth, we also see differences in growth. And that's important to us to understand because that allows us to take action to improve outcomes for all of our students. So here, of course, you see the disaggregation by our Asian groups of students. And again, you see the difference in terms of students who were in enrichment versus intervention, which is also another conversation for us to have as we think about, the eligibility pool of our students for our specialty programs going forward. So we did do some analysis of students who did not attend because we know that's really important as well. And so you'll see that we had 165 students that we were able to contact and get from them the reason they weren't able to attend. You can see, obviously, we've got the reasons all organized from highest to lowest. And so this is really important for us because this gives us an opportunity to think about as we apply our own cycle of continuous improvement to this work, what are some of the things we need to be very intentional about communicating and to whatever degree we can, mitigating. So if we do something like ELSP and frankly other types of programs of this nature, again, we learn from some of the reasons why some of our students and families weren't able to participate, so that we can address that as something to fix going forward in cases where we can. And you see here really the biggest ones were ones that I think all of us can appreciate as being very reasonable: conflict with work-home responsibilities, and we know that summer is a big time for activities for students. So ultimately, as we think about the opt-outs, we know we can't get that to zero, but we definitely want to mitigate that as much as we can. So really importantly, of course, and you've already heard the headline here, in terms of performance on the pre-post, this just again provides greater disaggregation by grade level, so you have a sense of where we saw improvement and where we didn't see improvement. Because again, for us, it's important to study both of these elements in terms of the students who improved and students who didn't improve, because this will drive our own internal conversations around what can we do differently, what must we do differently to ensure all of our students are successful. This again provides the student disaggregation that we do consistently here with the board. And then here you have the disaggregation of our Asian subgroup. Again, You'll see the variation, and that is something that we're studying in terms of just better understanding what are strategies that we might do differently, practices we can do differently in order to mitigate the gaps that we see. And then, of course, our program difference as well. We did this for both ELA and math, and so this is basically the math disaggregation of students who improved and did not improve. And again, the comments stand in terms of looking at this variation. This is the fall work that we have underway. And so importantly, as you saw in the case studies, a big opportunity of ELSP was to directly support our seniors and high school students in general in terms of their ability to get back on track to graduate and for some to graduate, and then of course for A through G completion as well, because we know obviously with A through G completion is one of our measures of post-secondary choices for our students. And here we did a little bit of a different presentation, so you can see we've got this more on a chart basis, but again, the overall message is encouraging, but it's the same message in that we see variations by student group, and those are things that we're studying to make sure we try to understand what could we do differently to support our students, particularly in this notion of getting students back on track for graduation. And then also as we think about student group, student subgroup performance, same thing with A through G completion, basically the same conversation of looking at these groups of students, those who are off track, those who are subject borderline, and obviously those that we want to get on track, and basically spending time really diving into the student group differences, but celebrating the fact that we can see ELSP was a win for students in our system, and that we were able to show growth across getting more students on track, moving students from off track to subject borderline, and some subject off track students into subject borderline status. So again, as a system, this was an important opportunity for us to actually change conditions in the present for our students. So in wrapping up, we have several next steps. I'll really speak to the first one because this is really important for us in terms of the part 2 of the evaluation, which again, as I mentioned, is our fall work. And this is really the sustainability of ELSP, because our belief is this really is going to support our students in terms of their grade level readiness. And so we're going to spend time really trying to best understand this whole notion that you see in many fields between the treatment and comparison group. So we really want to understand to what degree that ELSP have the impact we expected in terms of students who fit the profile for intervention versus students who fit the profile for intervention but didn't participate. And so that's really going to be an important emphasis for us going forward. And then obviously looking at the challenges, we want to understand why those challenges existed. And so we'll be spending some time understanding the targeted versus non-targeted student populations and looking at the variation that we saw by site as well, because we know that those give us an opportunity to learn about standard work processes that we can do in support of our students. And then finally, we shared these with you in April. These are some of the high-level kind of overall measures that we're looking at. You'll notice back to the conversation about the 4 tenets, they kind of break out by those in terms of looking at elements of logistics, looking at elements of student performance. And I really will point to the first one being one of the major reasons that we believe ELSP was a win for our students in terms of building their academic content and building their ability beyond grade level. And so when we look at the fall results, we'll take an opportunity to see to what degree that the ELSP experience really helps students build success going forward, because that's probably the #1 way we have to address the gaps that you see in some of the results. With that, I'll close and open up to questions.
Mr. Barrios, do we have any public comments?
We have one public comment from Kenya Martinez.
Good evening again, board members. As a representative for the Coalition for Students with Disabilities, I would like to ask the board, as far as the extended summer program, is there an implementation plan, an evaluation made for extended school year and for our students with disabilities? We don't hear matrices regarding the students who are served in this district. So that's what I ask of the board. That's it. Thank you.
So the superintendent just let me know that we have Ed Aldridge here tonight to answer the question of how students with disabilities fared in our summer programming. Correct, Superintendent? Can I ask, why isn't that just an indicator in the disaggregated data? Yes, please.
I think what Ms. Martinez is referring to is our extended school year program, which is for our students with disabilities,
Okay,
and the data
thank you.
around that.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other public comments?
No further comments?
With that, we'll take board member comments. Our first comment comes from our student board member.
I just had a question because I couldn't find it anywhere. Do you have like how many people opted out and how many people participated? Just that exactly.
So our overall participation was just under the 4,000. In terms of the opt-outs, they do break into two categories. One is for students, or one is for folks who told us that was the 165, and then we did have another, and this is the numbers we have to study more deeply, about another 700 or so of students who didn't show up. We don't have a reason for yet. So that's the number we have to study that gets at what the principal mentioned in terms of students who didn't show.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Board member Minnick.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions around the challenges. I think that Ms. Udipo, did I say it right? Talked about. You talked about the no-shows and the passive. I want to say passive dropouts, but I guess it's passive opt-outs. And I wanted to know, and I'm aware that our budget for this year does not include expanded learning, but we can hope that something will come together by then. I'm looking for takeaways from what we saw in terms of no-shows and the passive opt-outs. Was there anything that we saw that was like site-specific that worked better than other places that we can use as to inform how we ensure that the kids show up in future summers? And so I was curious about that and you mentioned in there the variation by sites in terms of assessment participation, but I was curious about the no-show amount by site and if that was a factor, and if we're breaking that down and what we can kind of extrapolate from that.
So I'll say at this point, absolutely the points you raised, the ones we're looking at, and that's part of the part two for us, because we've done some disaggregation, and obviously in terms of our student groups, there's a little bit of disproportionality, but we also realize we actually need to dig down to the site and get site explanations, and we're actually literally doing that right now in terms of working with site teams to try and get the narrative to help us understand kind of the high-level numbers that we're seeing. So that's something that we expect to be able to report on hopefully within the next month or so.
And then I guess my other piece to that, which I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I'm just wondering, we kind of took a blanket approach, kind of district-wide, how we rolled this out. Were there in fact differences in how things were implemented at different sites in terms of getting the information out to families, following up on no-shows, that kind of stuff? Or was it pretty consistent between sites? Do we have any of that kind of information at this point?
Hi. So much of it was actually consistent, and kind of was kind of directed by district office.
A lot of it came, all those calls came from here and stuff. Right?
Exactly. A lot of it came centrally. However, each school site was asked to do things like, okay, well, on the first day when you have kids who don't show up, just like Ms. Vigil was saying at Rosemont, then get on the phones. Okay, chase kids and try and get them to come. And so I think each school did that. In terms of kind of, do we have the narrative from every single school around that? Not yet.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Turkey. Member Cochran.
Thank you. Before my questions, I would like to praise the work that you've done. It's fantastic. It's so exciting to have a meaningful summer school in this district after many years of not having one. Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions that need just quick answers, and then probably one that's going to take a longer answer. What is enrichment? What is that exactly?
Okay, so there were two different versions of enrichment. One was at the middle school level and one was at the high school level. So at the middle school level, there was intervention for those students who were struggling in English language arts and math. And then the enrichment portion was for those students who they were not struggling in English arts and math. And in fact, they were on track to be eligible for those criterion-based programs, such as HISP, such as PACE, such as West Campus. And as we've seen before, that eligibility pool starts to shrink year on year. So if you track it in kindergarten, it's really quite big, and then you keep on going down through the grade levels or up through the grade levels, and it shrinks, okay? And so what we wanted to do was basically firm up that pool of students to stop that shrinkage.
And what did that consist of?
So that consisted of SAT practice and argumentative writing practice.
Okay.
Because in terms of kind of the admissions to get into those programs,
Right.
those are the kind of things which you have to do. So it's specifically practicing that.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So I don't know if you have this data, but do you know how our enrollment compared to other similar summer school programs in other districts or? No, okay, thank you. So can you turn the slides to number 14, please? So this is a question, I'm sure it'll pop up in a minute. 14. This is a question about testing. So number 14 has challenges on the top. So the actual testing vehicle, I imagine that you're probably going to use a new one next year or a different version?
So the testing vehicle is our vehicle Illuminate. What a lot of our technical problems is when you have a publisher such as, let's say, Benchmark, okay, who our English language arts come from, is we need to get the questions out of Benchmark and then put them into Illuminate, and then get our teachers access to that so then they can actually then distribute it out to students. And in terms of my technical expertise, Member Cochran, that's kind of as far as it goes.
No, I completely appreciate that, and I understand those types of difficulties. What I'm asking is basically, you know, when you have tests, they change every year, and usually you can see last year's tests to see what they were. As a board member, I'd like to see what the questions were.
Okay.
If possible. And one of the reasons that I'm interested in that is that I know some of our partners who do summer school programs also did some testing. I believe they took a sampling of what we gave to our students, and I'd like to know how we compared in our work to their work. Not trying to best or show off any either one. I just want to see best practices. Can we do that?
Let me, actually, Kelly was kind of whispering in my ear. I'm going to ask you to repeat your question, but just to clarify about the assessments that were administered. So for example, at the elementary level, we used a program called iReady. It's an adaptive computer-based assessment. So essentially, every student is getting a different set of questions because it's adapting. So we wouldn't be able to give you access to that.
Okay.
However, for mathematics, we used a pre-built assessment and Illuminate, which Matt referred to, that we can provide you with those items.
Totally get that, but you also test on standards, so I'm wondering if you have apples to apples standards for what we did and what some of our partners did.
Oh, our partners.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a different question. Yes.
Yeah, well, that was kind of my follow-up, because I'd like to, like I say, I'm not comparing in order to show failure on one or the other, but I'd like to see best practices in each of the different approaches. Okay, so it's just something I am interested in, so thank you, and I look forward to seeing that. And here's what I really want to say very strongly. Summer school should not be on any chopping block. And I know our budgets are something that we have to wrangle with, but this is the best thing I've seen since I've been on the board, a robust, wonderful summer school. Thank you to this team, and I will make it my purpose to support summer school and keep it in this district. Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar.
Thank you, Board Member Cochran. for your passionate support of ELSP. I want to begin my comments and questions by just recognizing the extraordinary effort of the team, as well as the vision and fortitude of the superintendent. I think that the magnitude of challenge that our new superintendent has faced over the course of this year has been remarkable, to say the least. So amidst all of these extraordinary circumstances, to have the ability to launch a summer school program of this caliber is very encouraging. Having been a parent to a child in the program, I had a bird's eye view to what worked and areas where there are potential for improvement. But overall, what I found was that my daughter emerged more confident and definitely had an experience that led her to get up every morning asking to go to school, which is not an easy feat during the summer. I have a couple questions that I want to ask and then observations. I did notice in digging into the data, slides 25 and 30, if you look at the improvements that were made on the post and pre-ELA test scores and the pre and post math test scores, and thank you for clarifying how those assessments were done, what tools you used. I note that if you look at the total number of students and where they made gains, on slide 30, for math, our Black or African American students or students with 2 or more races seem to struggle more than other ethnic subgroups, particularly if you look at the number of students. So clearly we have, American Indian struggling, but there was only 1 student, right? So if you look at the Black or African American students, 56.9% made gains in math, but 43.1% didn't. 2 or more races, 44.4% didn't. And so I'm interested if you've begun to dig into this data and say, well, since that population struggled perhaps at a higher rate than others, did we see that there was more absenteeism among that population? Do we have correlations potentially to that academic achievement? And then the other interesting data point for me around this is that while we saw really a more significant struggle for this population in math, we actually saw greater gains in ELA. So for our Black or African American students and our 2 or more races, we saw that 60% of Black or African American students saw gains with ELA. And so that's fascinating to me. What is it that we were doing that enabled our Black student population to achieve at higher standards in reading than math, right? And did you see significant variation if you look at that subgroup versus other subgroups? Have you begun to think about that?
I would say we've begun. A lot of this we want to take down to the site level, and we haven't had an opportunity to complete that analysis yet, but that's the path we're on, is to try and look at the variation in performance and try and make, very detailed assessments of what drove it. And so we're still in that process.
So thank you. I appreciate that answer. And actually, that was going to be my next question. I was curious as to whether or not we saw that there was variation among sites. In other words, if you were to take like-sized elementary schools and populations, ethnic demographics, did we see that one site outperformed another? And then what lessons learned would come from that, right? Attendance. Was there variation at one site versus the next? So that's really helpful. I look forward to digging into that data more. I have to say that, when I look at slides like slide 8, and we're seeing that some students went from 33.3% on track towards meeting grade level readiness in math to 94.4% with a 61% gain. That is absolutely astonishing and exciting to me, particularly when I see that that is a subgroup that is quite often left behind. And so, I'm very interested in figuring out, what classroom was that? What happened in that classroom? I know my daughter was very fortunate to be in a class with only 12 students, and she is reading at a level that I haven't seen in years past despite best efforts. And we had wonderful programs and did see gains through Freedom Schools, but certainly she made significant gains in reading, not as much in math, interestingly enough. And so I am curious as to why. So thank you for your work. I also just want to point out, and this is because this is so exciting to me in launching a new initiative of this nature, when you have 156 students who would not be on track for four-year college eligibility, turn that dynamic around in a short period of time over the summer and now be on track for maximizing their post-secondary options, that is a validation of this work. And so, I just want to again commend the staff and our superintendent for having the vision and fortitude to move this forward. And it is very troubling to me that we are facing a fiscal dilemma where the County Office of Education is telling us we're going to have to make $30 million in cuts in order to be certified, because these are exactly the programs that we should be funding and expanding sufficient to meet student needs. And so I would echo Board Member Cochran's comments. I know that tough choices will have to be made, but we have to look at how we can attract the funding necessary to continue what we know works, particularly for Black and brown students. So thank you. Moving on to our next item, item 8.2, approving resolution number 3021 or 3022, the material revision of the charter petition for Gateway Community Charters.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, esteemed board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. This agenda item is to approve resolution number 3021 or 3022, which is the material revision of the charter petition for Gateway Community Charters, Sacramento Academic and Vocational Academy, SCUSD. And for tonight's purposes, we will refer to them as simply as SAVA. I am Jack Kramer, Director of Innovative Schools and Charter Oversight. And to my left, I have Mr. Jason Sample from Gateway Community Charters. He is the Chief Communications and Strategy Officer. And at the far end, Mr. Aaron Thornsberry, also from Gateway. He is the Chief Business Officer. The contents of this presentation entails the overview of the charter school and tonight's proposed program. We will also look at the material revision that is requested alongside with the statutory requirements. And finally, we will conclude with staff's analysis and next steps. This is the same slide from the June 21st public hearing, and so I'll give members a quick moment to refresh. And while you do, just a reminder that in bold is the requested program information, along with the original overview of SAVA. SAVA's material revision request is to add a resource center in collaboration with the Wind Youth Center in downtown Sacramento. The material revision may be granted in the form of an amendment to the charter, and what you see before you is the actual Amendment 1. If granted, Amendment 1 would become part of the charter. Please note that the terms of the amendment is subject to all charter school commitments, terms, and conditions of its original charter petition, including their student enrollment. The statutory process for the material revision request is number one, that any changes to the charter petition must be made with the approval of the authority that granted the charter. And in this case, that would be you as the board. And number two, renewals and material revisions, they are governed by the same standards and criteria, and that being Ed Code 47605. As part of the staff's analysis, first we took consideration the fact that the added resource center, they do utilize the same curriculum as proposed in the recently approved SAVA charter petition. So with that said, the educational aspects were not evaluated. Equally, we took into consideration that The operational aspects, they are in essence the same procedures. They use the same home office management as the two existing Sava locations. And so with that, the operational aspects were not evaluated. Given the above, the main focus really was the fiscal component. And so the review and evaluation was to look at what was the impact of adding an additional site and what impact would that make to not only Sava SCUSD, but also their parent charter management organization, Gateway Community Charters. Overall, it is the consensus of the Charter Department and the Budget Services Department that by adding a new location, it does not negatively affect the fiscal soundness and viability of not only Sava, but also their parent organization, Gateway Community Charters. District staff would also like to note that Gateway Community Charters, they do have very substantial reserves in relationship to their revenues. For next steps, the governing board shall either approve Resolution 3021 to approve the material revision, or approve Resolution 3022 and adopt the written staff report as its own to deny the material revision for Sava SCUSD. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Is there any, would the petitioner like to speak? You don't have to. Thank you.
Director Kramer.
All right. Are there any public comments?
None, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. With that, I will take Member Cochran.
Thank you. I just need some clarification. So the site that's proposed to be open, what is it exactly? Where is the exact physical location?
815 S Street in downtown Sacramento, and it would be in Wind Youth Center's facilities. So they would be leasing that facility.
And Sava is located where?
They're headquartered in the McClellan Air Force Base, former McClellan Air Force
So we're not
Base.
talking about the Power Inn facility?
No, no. When they became authorized by our district, they had their existing location on Power Inn, as well as their other location on Logan, which is the SIM Center.
Can you clarify the district's position on this petition?
We do not see any negative fiscal impact. They're very healthy as a charter management organization. And so their overall budget for that one location is approximately 1.2, the budget is about 1.2 million for that location. And they're projected to still come out ahead about 200,000 for the year.
Well, thank you for the information. As a matter of principle, I'm not for charter schools. I voted to approve Sava because of the work they were doing on the Power Inn Road site, particularly with the instruction by a superior teacher and some wonderful students. However, it was specifically zeroed in on that site and the work doing there, so I will not be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
I would like to add a point of clarification, is that all of their original charter commitments stand. So within their petition, they do have overall enrollment projections. And for the sake of argument, let's use 1,200 for the 5-year period. So by the addition of this particular site, it does not affect their overall enrollment projections. So simply, it's just spreading out students from 2 locations to a third one. One for a matter of convenience for some of their students, but also to address a specific targeted population.
I'm sorry, Member Wu, may I do a follow-up?
Sure.
So are the Power Inn students going to be frequenting this new site?
I believe there'll be roughly 25 that are going to transition there.
Okay. And the programs that are being offered at the new site, will they involve any of the construction programs that are currently going on at Power Inn?
The curriculum for the new resource center is in essence the same curriculum as Sava SCUSD.
Thank you.
Member Minnick, or Vice President, Second Vice President Minnick. I'm sorry.
Thank you, First Vice President Wu.
You're welcome.
So I just want to say that I really appreciate the way that Sava and the Gateway folks are utilizing these partnerships. I think a lot of times we operate in isolation, and you all have done a really good job of being part of the community and making sure the other organizations that support young people in our community are part of the system. And this is I feel like a great use of the supports that already exist in order to serve our kids. So I'm absolutely in support of, I guess it's Resolution 3021 to approve the revision, knowing that it doesn't ultimately change the initial petition that we've already approved, but it just creates better access for the kids that you're already serving. And I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of attendance, in terms of success for your kids. So I think this is a smart move. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Minnick. And I too will concur with Vice President Minnick. I note that the Wynn Youth Center is an organization that one of our colleagues up here on the dais was the executive director for, and they serve the homeless youth, and this is a great opportunity to extend education to them for those who have been left behind without services. So I think this is a great opportunity. I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 3021. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any further discussion? May I ask for, what are you guys talking about? I was going to ask for a preferential vote.
The president has just appeared.
Let me explain to the president where we are then. Madam President, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 3021, which will approve the material revision of the charter petition for Gateway Community Charter Sacramento, SAVA. And we were just asking for the student preferential vote.
Okay, thank you. Student preferential vote.
I vote to approve Resolution 3021.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
We have a motion.
And a second?
And a second.
Oh, we do, sorry. Came in a little slow. As soon, okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And one opposed. It looks like the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.3, recruitment retention efforts of fully credentialed teachers.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the board. My name is Concy McCarn, the Chief Human Resource Officer, and with me is Roxanne Finley, HR Director, Cindy Nguyen, Employee Relations Director, and Dr. Tiffany Smith-Simmons, HR Director. In our wonderfully diverse district, we have an obligation to work to ensure our students have every opportunity to succeed. An important part of that is ensuring that teachers are in the classroom. With years of teacher shortages, positive efforts to reduce class sizes in K-3, we've been challenged to fully staff our classrooms. While we do expect to begin this school year fully staffed in our elementary schools, we have much work ahead of us to reach our ultimate goals. And to that end, we'd like to share some information with you this evening regarding the recruitment retention efforts, and then certainly take your questions, comments, suggestions as we move forward.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, members of the board, Superintendent Aguilar. Just a couple highlights of our numbers for gearing up as we are still entering in data into our system for our new hires, which we're more than halfway there. So just highlights from last year compared to this year. And also to share that we have about 94 attrition from last school year going into this school year, and that we've hired approximately 119 teachers, which includes our open contract hires. And of our open contracts or of our new hires, we have hired 3 classified, 52 non-districts, 59 open contracts, and 5 of them from our substitute pool. And we are going to get into some demographics and information in regards to our elementary classroom teachers. This graph reflects our elementary classroom teachers and shows data over the last 2 years, including the current school year. It also shows the number of teachers in each ethnicity and race with the overall total number of elementary teachers and then broken down by percentages. And as I noted earlier, we are still entering in data for this current school year. You'll also notice that there's been an increase in all 3 years in Asian, while there is a decrease in white in all 3 years. This next graph breaks down the specific race within the Asian demographics from the previous slide. While most stayed stagnant, there was a slight increase in Hmong over the 3-year period. This graph reflects our secondary classroom teachers. You'll notice between last year Okay. You'll notice between last year and this year, the following ethnicity either increased or stayed the same in American Indian, Asian, Hispanic, African American, and white. This graph just breaks down the specific race within the Asian demographic from the previous slide. Our special ed classroom teacher demographics reflects over the last 3 years, there's been a slight increase in Asian. Between last year and this year, a slight increase in Hispanic and African American. Over the last 3 years, a decrease in white. And again, this graph just breaks down the Asian demographics from the previous slide, but you'll notice there is an increase in Filipino due to our out-of-country recruit, and a slight decrease in Japanese from 2 years ago. For our certificated non-management demographic, this includes all of our districts, certificated non-management, race and ethnicity, over the last 2 years, including this year. Between last year and this year, there's a slight increase in Hispanic and a decrease in white, while the percentages stayed the same for Asian and African American. And again, this slide just breaks down the Asian specific race of the previous slide. My colleague Tiffany will continue.
Good afternoon or good evening. Our engagement and our ongoing recruitment as we gear up for the 18-19 school year has involved personal outreach, continued partnership and support of our CSUS SCUSD dual credential cohort, and I would like to note that these candidates, upon completion of this program, will earn a dual credential, both in multiple subject and educational specialists. We've offered an increased number of new employee orientations, and we continue to assist with the credential processing needs such as renewals and first-time credential applications. Late spring, Sac City joined a consortium of surrounding districts focused on educator retention efforts. Our recruitment efforts are highlighted here. Of particular note is the forming of the Recruitment Advisory Committee that has helped to shape our spring recruitment efforts. Members of the committee include SCTA, CSUS, UPE, and other district staff. We've had several recruitment events during the spring, noting that we held a special recruitment event just for special education department. We continue to support our candidates through our classified teacher pathway cohort. This is a partnership with SCOE and Bradman University. The intent of this project is to assist our classified members, employees, in either obtaining their undergraduate degree and/or teaching credential. The district's successful negotiation of efforts yielded increased salaries for our teachers, as well as allowed teachers to enter our system without a cap in years of experience. We know that focusing on recruitment in isolation will yield results that will mirror that of a hamster running around continuously in the hamster wheel. Roxanne will now share the other side of recruitment, and that's retention.
As we've just heard about the work we're doing to recruit great educators in our district, teacher retention is recruitment's partner in maintaining a well-functioning education system. As we recruit and hire the best and the brightest, it is imperative that we retain the best and the brightest for our students. Now let's look at one of our focus areas for our teacher retention work, namely the teachers separating from our district pre-retirement. At the end of the 17-18 school year, 94 classroom teachers, or about 5% of our classroom teaching staff, separated from the district, noting that of the 94, 36 were resignations. When we talk about our retention work, the area of job dissatisfaction becomes our focal point to find out why. Our current voluntary exit interview process provides specific details about why teachers leave through the use of surveys and face-to-face meetings with HR. This informs us of valuable data to assist in our teacher retention work. Presented here are citations found in the research about teachers leaving the profession. We can see from this slide that the exodus from the teaching profession should be viewed as a continuing concern for school districts. This trend contributes greatly toward teacher shortages and also hurts student learning. Research also says that teachers leave the profession within 5 years of starting in the field. This is an additional focus for our department and our teacher retention work as we look at the next slide on teacher longevity with our school district. Acknowledging the 5-year trend of walkers or leavers from the teaching profession, this slide provides a snapshot of the service years or longevity of our teaching force. We are particularly interested in the 538 teachers that represent 5 years or less of district service, as they are of greater risk to walk away from the profession altogether, and more importantly, walking away from our students. Our retention efforts are not limited to those highlighted here tonight, but they do include a recent MOU with SCTA and the new Teacher Support Department, which allows the district to expand their support to new teachers, to the profession, and to our district. Realignment of the instructional support provided by the district will be twofold. Increased instructional leadership support for our principals, which will mean increased support for our teachers. We know in life, balance is important. Wouldn't we all agree? Self-care helps everyone offer their best. A healthy balance between work and life is known to be a favorable outcome in retention. The district's wellness program helps educate our employees to strike that balance.
Good evening, board members and superintendent. I'm Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. We have been very concerned, as you recall, I've testified in the past about the importance of recruitment and retention. And I think I wanted to commend the HR unit for tonight presenting information about the depth of the problem, and especially identifying the reasons that people are leaving, because it suggests that there will be a real focus on supporting, as Ms. Finley talked about, the 538 who are most at risk of walking. Those are the ones who have 5 years or less experience. I would guess that those teachers who have less experience are in schools with students who need the most experienced teachers, because that's what the national research tends to show. The LCAP process elicited a lot of comments from participants since the beginning of the LCAP process about teacher training, teacher turnover, and so it's timely that this information is being presented, and I would recommend that there also be, in terms of the investigation around why teachers are leaving and the work with principals, to understand how the professional development that was bought a couple of years ago with supplemental funding around, that 1 hour a week that everybody was supposed to be working on together.
Collaborative time.
Yes, it sounds very similar to something that was done in the summer program, how that is affecting the satisfaction or not, because that's a big contribution of funding.
Very good.
I also want to say that the presentation is so timely with the declaration of need that's coming up. And it's especially troubling because 25 of those, well, most of those teachers are for students that have the greatest needs.
Thank you, Ms. Guillen.
I promise I won't speak during every public comment, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I actually love teachers. I love really good teachers. So as far as hiring new teachers, I'll just point out that in other districts, they have more competitive salaries. So as far as hiring new teachers in Sacramento City Unified School District, and you are studying to become a teacher, why would you want to work here if you're making $15,000 less than you would make in another district like Elk Grove? So that's the first thing I want to point out. The second thing is, because of this new generation of teachers who are coming up, they are usually at least $35,000, $36,000 in debt. So coming straight out of college, they don't want to take a job where they're making $47,000, because I just looked on the website for Sacramento Teachers Association. Why should they work here? There's no incentive to work here. That's number one. Number two is, I do have 2 children. One is twice exceptional, so he's in a GATE class. So that teacher is GATE certified. I would make a recommendation to HR that they look for teachers who are GATE certified, but who are also special education certified as well. A lot of teachers, a lot of students are not identified as GATE. My son was one of them. He was placed in special education in 2nd grade, but luckily enough, he had a really good special education teacher who identified him as needing to be in GATE, but needed accommodations for his classroom. So I just wanted to point that out. Just higher compensation for new teachers. That's a great incentive. GATE certification, special education certification. That's what you should look for in your new teachers.
Thank you
And
very much.
That's it. Thank you.
Do we have any board member comments or questions? Board Member Minnick.
Real quick, I know we're behind. So I hate to harp on negatives, but I'm gonna anyway. So on the slide where it talks about the reasons for resigning, being job dissatisfaction, relocation, et cetera, do we have a breakdown of which were from job dissatisfaction compared to relocation? Because I mean, if it's 35 relocations and one dissatisfaction, then we're doing pretty good. But if it's the reverse, then we have a problem. So those are very different reasons to leave a job. So I wanted to see if we had any breakdown of that.
Yeah, actually, this is an area of growth for us in the next year. We have surveys, as were mentioned, that are offered upon exit, and including face-to-face conversations. But because it's not a required part of the practice, it's if you want to, and if you respond to the email or if you send it back, then we do. So that's something we need to streamline and make a little bit more systematic. So based on the ones that we do receive, and the conversations that we do have, it is across the board.
I feel like
There's not a whole lot of data. I mean, hopefully when we're coming back and sharing updates, we have more specific data because we will have started implementing something that is more systematic in terms of responses.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Kansi. Vice President Wu.
Thank you, President Ryan. I will note that a 5% turnover per year is maybe extraordinary in education, but in government, in management, we plan for about 5% turnover per year. That's what the expectation is. So I just want to make a note of that, and I want to make a note of the what I see in the distribution of teachers versus years of service. The least population we have is those who have been serving 6 to 10 years, because that's when we were laying off heavily during the recession. So I am encouraged that we have 538 teachers who are 5 years or less, because that tells me that there are a number of teachers wanting to come into the profession. Having said that, Cindy, when we lay out the demographics of our teacher populations, can you compare that next time with our student population? One of the arguments that I have made in trying to, with Tiffany visiting the HBCUs, is that we have 14% African American population in our classrooms, and yet we only have 7% teachers. And so it is putting teacher faces that reflect the student faces that hopefully will help give us dividends, pay benefits. So to show the numbers together it would be helpful as well. I don't remember if I had, Tiffany, the CSUS Sac City Unified Dual Credential Cohort, how many are in the program? Okay. So, I mean, I love the program. We got to get more of our people into the program. And that would, I think, greatly enhance our pool for hiring. Those are my comments, but I want to thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Vice President Wu. I had a few comments and observations and questions. The first, I wanted to respond to the comment about compensation and ensuring our competitiveness. The board worked very diligently in the last contract negotiations to take the measure of ensuring that unlimited credit for prior years of service from surrounding districts be taken into account as a recruitment and retention tool so that we could bring more teachers from surrounding districts to Sac City. We actually have the highest total compensation in the region, and I want to point that out because that's a mismatch, right? So we do have the highest total compensation in the region, not salary alone, but benefits and lifetime benefits, as you know. What really is a disconnect is that as I speak with recent teaching graduates, as you very astutely said, they often are bearing the burden of debt. They often are looking to earn a higher salary. And so the idea of having a gold standard in healthcare or lifetime benefits is just not as attractive. And we have to do something to recognize that, because not only are we in a place where our total compensation package has disadvantaged us at times, it is not necessarily what our new teachers are asking for. And so I absolutely believe in honoring the commitments we made to our past generations of teachers, but we have to also recognize that a new generation of teachers might have a different set of needs and requests, and we need to be nimble enough to address that. I also want to just say, on top of the unlimited years of credit for prior years of service as a recruitment tool, and some of the work that we've done around trying to figure out making the two least competitive salary columns more competitive, we struggle with recruitment because of our school calendar. And so we know that our later start date significantly disadvantages us with neighboring districts because they're able to sign contracts with teachers sooner. And so we have a host of reasons why we should be aligning our calendars with our neighboring districts, not the least of which is making sure that our students have access to community college coursework upon graduation. But the school calendar issue is a real one and has to be taken into consideration with recruitment efforts. So I want to thank you for all of the work you're doing. My final question comes around the California Classified School Employee Teacher Credentialing Program. I know that $20 million was allocated to grants to really incentivize paraprofessionals that we know quite often have a heart for working with our neediest students and have demonstrated their commitment to the district to move into the ranks of teaching, including special education, which is an area where there is such grave need. Are we participating in the program?
We're participating, and I think it's our second year, in the CTC grant that was put out, maybe it was 3 years ago because there was a planning year, in collaboration with SCOE and with, I believe it's Brandman and a number of other districts in the area. For that, we utilized our partnership with SEIU to create a survey with them, to reach out to individuals to share if there was an interest. We held a number of informational sessions to gather interest, and we ended up getting
About 140
who came into the different sessions and heard information and are now, some in their first year, some in their second, some in their third year of that program at different stages, because you didn't have to have a bachelor's to come into it. And kind of two tracks. Those that did have bachelors went this route, those who didn't had an opportunity to earn the bachelor's and the teaching credential as well. We have some central office individuals participating in that. We have a number of site individuals participating in that, instructional aides and such.
So what you're saying is 140 potentially on different tracks are going to have the opportunity to become teachers with the district.
Well, 140 participated in the information session and expressed interest and came to multiple sessions on learning about the different programs offered. And the grant covered $4,000 towards their working through their tuition and towards the program. Not all of them ended up actually taking advantage of that, but showed interest.
Okay, thank you. And I did note, based upon a recent article in the Sacramento Bee, that Elk Grove was providing an educational match as an additional incentive. So I hope that we'll consider that as well. Okay. Looks like we don't have any other questions from board members. Item 8.4, approving the submission of the credential waiver application to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate the good information.
So Cindy and I are going to be talking with you, actually mostly Cindy, on the next two items. The approval submission of the waiver application as well as the declaration of need as we begin the school year with not only supporting our current teachers who need some additional support, thus the waiver request, as well as those who may be in positions that need additional credentialing support, thus the declaration of need. So to begin this one, Board President Ryan, members of the board, and Superintendent Aguilar, I'll turn it over to Cindy to talk about the requirements in terms of us needing to come to you to make the formal request and the benefit to students, teachers, but ultimately students.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, members of the board, Superintendent Aguilar. The Ed Code requires employers to take the submission of any waivers for board approval during open session, and that we are specifically asking for certain areas to be waived, not specifically their teaching credential that they currently hold. And it is to allow them additional time to either take some coursework or an exam. The waivers that for the individual teachers that we are obtaining are individuals such as ROTC teachers that come from the military that will need that additional time to complete 45 hours of professional development to get a certificate of staff development, which is equivalent to a CLAD. We also have some career and tech education teachers that also will need to be CLAD compliant, will need some additional time to take the coursework and the exam. We also have some dual immersion teachers that have teaching credentials but need a little bit of time to take the B-CLAD exam. They may have passed one or two and they just need that third section. And this will allow them the time to do so. And also our out-of-country, out-of-state recruits also just need a little bit of time to pass one or two of the exams that they're required to take. All of our educators do hold a California preliminary teaching credential that's valid for 5 years for them to continue teaching, with the exception of the board approving this waiver for a portion of the requirement. Staff recommends board approval for this waiver request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments on this item?
No public comments.
Okay, do we have any board member comments? One from board member Wu.
I move to approve the waiver.
Do we have a second? Student preferential vote?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, thank you. Item 8.5, approve the declaration of need for fully qualified educators for the 2018-19 school year.
Good evening. I am Cindy Nguyen.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm here to present the waiver, the request for the declaration of need. This is also a requirement per Ed Code in order for employers to submit the declaration of need to CTC on an annual basis to allow employers flexibility should employers need that during the course of the year when credential needs arise. And the areas that we are requesting for flexibility on should that arise is within the areas of English language authorizations, resource specialists, librarians, and emergency permits in special education, single subjects, or multiple subjects. The following efforts to recruit and hire fully prepared teachers, as you heard earlier in one of our presentations. But just to reiterate, we are in our second year of our dual credential program with Sac State, and those teachers will finish at the end of this school year and come out with the multiple subjects and a special ed credential. We've also recruited a little over 61 open contracts and collaborated with our partnerships to continue recruiting. And again, this declaration of need that is before you is to allow us the flexibility should the need arise. I will share there might be some instances similar to last year where we might have a fully credentialed teacher in one area, but given the need of the site of having a class in home economics and wanting to offer that to students, that teacher will need an emergency permit for that home economics, which is that one subject area outside of their teaching credential. So again, it just gives us that flexibility should that need arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? We don't. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Student board preferential vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you both for your
Thank
time
you.
tonight.
No, you can stay.
Item 9.0, consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second, to approve the consent agenda. Student preferential vote.
I vote yes on all open session items.
All those in favor? Aye. Item 10.0, business and financial information reports. Item 10.1, receive the reports. Item 11.0, future board meeting dates. The next board meeting of the Sac City Unified School District Board of Education will meet on September 6th. Closed session beginning at 4:30 p.m. with open session at 6 p.m. At this time, we are going to adjourn back into closed session. Thank you.